well.
Today, it's so wonderful to have the sunshine. I don't know when the sun last shone. But my name's Diana Abedy. Oh no.
This is Diana.
My name's Diana Abedy, and I am with Keep It Green. And Keep It Green is a citizens group that's interested in environmental issues, particularly those that affect the Hudson River, and also public health issues related to the environment. I'm so glad to see such a big turnout. I'm sorry we don't have seats for everyone. But the reason we're all here, I think we're all here for the same reason, and that's to show our concern, to learn, and we want to be able to answer your questions. So today's topic is C&D, which is demolition and construction waste on the Hudson, and we're focusing on Athens, the village of Athens, and the town of Catskill today. I want to say a big thank you to the Athens Police Department. We're very honored to have Sheriff Kaminsky here, and the fire department's always so nice. We've worked with them for the pumpkin parade for years, and yeah, they didn't even charge us for the coffee. So let's give them a big hand. And also to the village of Athens. But our primary co-sponsor for this event is Friends of Athens, and we really couldn't have done this and had such a big turnout without Friends of Athens. And I want to introduce you to the president and the founder of Friends of Athens, and that is Catherine Sensor. Catherine is a full-time resident of Athens. She's a former journalist and magazine editor. She now serves as the Director of Communications for Foundation Source. This company sets up and manages private philanthropic foundations. She graduated from Columbia, just like this guy. And she's here to introduce Riverkeeper Paul Galley. But before she does that, I want her to say a couple sentences about Friends of Athens. Catherine?
Sorry, adjusting for height efficiencies here. Thank you, Diana, not only for the introduction, but also for your leadership on this effort and hard work on this event. As Diana mentioned, I am the president and founder of Friends of Athens. And for those of you who don't know the group, we're the group that recently planted 40 trees in the village. And with luck, some of the trees that we planted will blossom this spring, but many of them won't reach their full maturity for years, and possibly not even during my lifetime. And that's what planting trees is about. It's faith that years from now, someone will be sitting in the shade, smelling the blossoms, or admiring the brilliant scarlet foliage on a fall day. And perhaps they will think kindly of us, or perhaps they won't think of us at all. They'll just enjoy the natural beauty that we helped nurture. But you and I will know that we left a legacy of care. With that legacy of care in mind, I ask that everyone who previously served as an elected official in the town or village of Athens, please rise. I know we have a few. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen who just stood, I want to thank you for serving us and thank you for your ongoing concern for the village and town's well-being. I now ask current elected officials in the town or village of Athens to rise. Because, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I thank you for joining us today and for hearing from your constituents We need your leadership now more than ever. May I ask any elected officials and their representatives from other river communities to please rise?
Where's Germantown?
I know you're in the house. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for lending us your support. Like the river itself, this threat, the threat of these debris proposals, touches all of us. We're all in this together. And to help us understand that threat, I am pleased to introduce Paul Gallet. Mr. Gallet is the president of Riverkeeper. He and his team work to protect the Hudson River and the drinking water supplies for 9 million New Yorkers. An attorney and educator, Paul has been dedicated to the environmental movement since 1987, when he left the private practice of law and went to work for the New York State Attorney General. In 1990, Paul began a 10-year stint at New York's Department of Environmental Conservation, where he brought hundreds of corporate and government polluters to justice. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Gallet.
Thank you, Catherine. Can you all hear me? Okay, excellent. So we're off to an okay start. I'm honored and humbled to be here. It's an enormous crowd. I hope it's not violating any of the fire laws, but I think we're okay even if it is. I want to recognize a colleague of mine who you've already met, and that's Rebecca Martin. Rebecca is at our organization. We first met Rebecca because of her work with KingstonCitizens.org. And you're very fortunate to have so many people like Rebecca and Catherine, Diana, Laura, all the folks who are here from the organizations who are civic leaders. And you're so lucky to have leaders from within elected government who care about these issues and care about what you have to say about them and see their responsibility as leaving the village and the town better than they found it. I've seen a lot of cases in which proposals like this come forward, and I've almost never seen a stronger, is this any better? I've almost never seen a stronger presence out of the gate than what you all have here. And let me tell you, there is strength in numbers, and I'm going to start off where I'm going to end off, and that is, you put these proposals under a microscope, and you hold the government accountable to do so themselves. And everything that I've read indicates that the folks who are here from the government have every intention to do so. And the people who made the application, they're going to say this, but the truth may be that. You put this proposal under a microscope. You make sure that there is a full environmental impact statement prepared for it, and that every aspect, every possible adverse impact is studied before this gets anywhere near going forward. And if you do that, I think you're going to find some things that are going to give you some ammunition to get the sort of result that really will advance your community and advance what you want for your waterfront. I almost never talk about myself when I'm in a room like this for a reason like this, but this is one of those rare times that it actually matters, because when I was at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, I was in the New York City office. I was in the New York City office from 1990 to 2000, and that was the time when the New York City Sanitation Department told the private carters they couldn't go to Fresh Kills landfill on Staten Island anymore with commercial trash. And all of a sudden, there were transfer stations everywhere, dozens of them. And it was my responsibility to enforce the New York State solid waste siting regulations. Some of you may have heard the phrase Part 360. I try not to use acronyms because I think acronyms end up giving people a distance from the work, and I don't want you to have any distance from the work. You have to be as effective as you can be. But Part 360 is the section of the regulations that covers these sorts of facilities. And I was also involved in the closure of Fresh Kills, because the irony was the sanitation department in New York City shut Fresh Kills to the commercial carters because they wanted to preserve more space for city trash that they collected with the city trucks. And then lo and behold, a couple of years later, they decided to close down the landfill entirely. So ever since then, New York City's been playing catch up. And this proposal, these proposals that you're looking at now are some of the evidence that they're still playing catch-up. And I don't think you should be responsible for helping them catch up, not in a location like is being proposed, and not with a facility that's being proposed, and certainly not with an unlined construction and demolition debris landfill that's been proposed for Catskill, which is completely inconsistent with these Part 360 regulations. So Riverkeeper, as most of you probably know, we've been around for about 55 years. We got our start when the river was so polluted that people who were fisher folk, they couldn't eat their catch. It smelled like oil. It was contaminated by metals. We still have the huge PCB problem that you're all probably well aware of. And in those 55 years since we got our start, we've sort of branched out to try to foster something more sustainable, something more that we can pass along to our kids and grandkids and nieces, nephews, whomever, or just the people who buy our house when we're ready to live someplace else. And we want that to be better than we inherited. And it's bigger and bigger challenge every year. We have these issues associated with sea level rise. We had 8 inches of sea level rise in the last 100 years, and it's probably going to get worse. We have these issues associated with storm surge. I was bailing our offices out in Ossining the night of Superstorm Sandy, and I know that I was among the lucky ones because I never got above the first step. The pump broke down, and so I got a workout, but that was all right too. So we got these big challenges. They're not getting any smaller, and in the meanwhile, we have to not make dumb moves. And from everything I can see here, we have some dumb moves to avoid. So a little bit of information. This is not an environmental law lecture because that would be just too deadly dull. No matter how serious the situation is, I want to keep it simple, and I want to recommend that you all assure that you can get some local representation. You should get some local representation, not just from an attorney with familiarity with this issue. And don't worry, Riverkeeper's not going anywhere. And Riverkeeper is going to be present and accounted for. But we can't represent you. We can represent the river, and we can represent the law, but you might need your own representation, and so think seriously about that. You also want to make sure that you've got some folks who understand the engineering of these facilities, who understand what it's like to take down a building. You may know that the company is proposing to take only a limited number of types of construction and demolition debris because they want to qualify for a lesser standard of permitting. There's a registration and there's a permit. And for the permit, you got to get an environmental impact analysis done, and for a registration, you don't. Fortunately, you all have some permits which your elected officials are almost certain to talk about, some of which I've actually had to apply for. I had to apply for a special use permit when I was working for a land conservation organization. And any special use permit application that isn't consistent with the character of your waterfront, your goals for the waterfront, that is disfavored, and that is putting it mildly. So you've got some local laws that are important to remember, and if this company comes to the New York State DEC and says, well, I don't need to do an environmental impact statement for you, and I don't need to do a full permit for you because I'm only taking a limited number of materials, soil and brick and asphalt and the like, as if that's clean stuff, then you remind the DEC you must consider the suitability of the applicant for holding this permit. That's right there in those regulations that I mentioned. You must consider prohibited areas where you cannot site any sort of facility, whether it's a registration facility or a permit facility. And that includes wetlands, floodplains, and areas where endangered species are involved. You must consider the adequacy of their plan for the operation of this facility. They'll tell you that they want to have nothing but the cleanest sorts of construction and demolition debris, which somehow sounds a little internally inconsistent. But anybody who's ever seen a building come down, whether it's here or in New York City or wherever, you know the idea that you can just wave a wand and separate out the drywall from the treated wood, from the soil, from the concrete, from the other masonry. These things are all in a pile, and they contaminate one another. And so that's why you have landfills that are tested by the EPA. EPA tested 21 landfills. And, you know, Catskill's proposing getting a landfill from Peckham. Anybody who tells you it's a berm, you tell them it's a landfill. A landfill. Hard stop. And landfills need liners, and they need leachate collection, and neither of those, I think, is proposed by Peckham. So that's a non-starter, it seems to me. So 21 landfills, and they tested for 93 different chemicals. And 24 of those chemicals exceeded regulatory health-based standards. Things like iron and manganese, lead, total dissolved solids, cadmium. These are things that are very seriously putting your groundwater at risk if you're on well water, or very seriously putting your surface waters at risk, and your surface waters may, end up in the Hudson, which of course we care very deeply about. We care deeply about all of these waters. These landfills have these contaminants because it is virtually impossible to screen them out. EPA will report chemicals like zinc, copper, pH exceeding the ambient water quality standards for protection of freshwater aquatic life. These are not consistent with leaving a legacy for kids, home purchasers, the people who are going to make Athens or Catskill or Coxsackie or any other community strong a generation from now. We have fights that are unavoidable, that we're going to have to fight over the next generation or two to keep these communities as wonderful as they are now, and maybe even hopefully make them better. Construction and demolition debris, landfills and transfer stations next to state parks, in floodplains and wetlands areas, which these may be, these are not going to move us forward. These are going to move us backwards. Before I wrap up, and I'm not going anywhere, I'm happy to take questions after the other speakers, and I'm not going to rush out of here at the end of this. I do want to really recognize the partnership that our organization has with groups like Hudson River Sloop Clearwater and Scenic Hudson. The board chair of Scenic Hudson, Kristen Gamble, is here today, and I think she's going to have some things to say in a little while. But, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. When we work together, we accomplish things. We stopped the Wheelabrator proposal for the toxic incinerator ash dump in Catskill last year because we held the proposal to the scrutiny it deserved. You hold this proposal to the scrutiny it deserves, I don't think it's going to, pardon the pun, hold water. So thank you for inviting me. Like I say, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. That was really inspirational and very helpful too. Oh gosh.
It's a tough road, Diane. they're feisty.
So Paul mentioned Catherine, and Catherine is with Riverkeeper, and she has also Rebecca has been so helpful to us in Keep It Green, and with both the Peckham proposal and the Athens proposal. I just want to say that she has her own organization that she founded in 2006. It's called Kingston Citizens. It's a volunteer group that's committed to nurturing transparency in local government. She also helped save a historic area in Kingston recently, which they were going to put a big modern hotel there, right? Is that right?
It's not over, but
it's not over, but she's working on it. She's so busy, and she has put in so many hours behind the scene, Rebecca. And just on a very personal note, I met Rebecca 20 years ago in a jazz club in the Berkshires. She's a remarkable jazz singer, and she just finished recording.
Diana, stop.
And I know, I'm so in awe of you and the other people here. She is our moderator. We couldn't ask for a better moderator or a liaison to Keep It Green. Rebecca, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I am just going to give a little bit of housekeeping here up front If you didn't know, it's such a great crowd, but the bathrooms, in the case you need them, are over here to the right and then on the left. We're being filmed today, which is great, so that more of the community is able to see and hear what's happening this afternoon. Clark Richters from the Kingston News is here, and Larry is here too to film. So you will be filmed in the case that you ask any questions. I just wanted to make you aware of that. There's going to be a question and answer period following the presentations. We don't have microphones in the audience, but I'll help you the best I can. We'll come around and take turns. Can repeat our questions in the case that we need you to project. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I just wanted you to know that questions will follow the presentations this afternoon. And before we begin, I would like to bring Kristen Gamble from Scenic Hudson, who's the chair of the board, who's here today from Hudson, as Paul introduced earlier, just to say a few words before Diana comes back to introduce the speakers.
Well, I'm not prepared to make a formal presentation, so don't expect that. I'm not prepared to give a formal presentation, so don't expect that. But I just want to be here as a citizen. I live over in Hudson, and I am board chair of Scenic Hudson, and what happens here matters to us a lot. I never cease to be amazed after decades of effort by so many local people and organizations up and down the Hudson River to repair from the industrialization of the early 20th century and the 19th century as it happened in the river and really polluted it. So here we go again. Somebody, after all this cleanup that we've done and advancements that we've been making, how can they even imagine doing this? I mean, it's just phenomenal to me. So our president, Ned Sullivan, did put out a press release earlier, I guess last night or today, whatever. And he just reiterates the fact that this is something that must be fought. I mean, we have done so much in this area to, create the skywalk just 8 months ago that was opened, and the views from the skywalk and how that is going to be, tainted, in a word, by these efforts. And so we really need a local group, a local active, large participation that fights this. And Paul has laid out a lot of the ground rules of what has to happen. And we are very much in support of what you're trying to do. I have a sidebar. A personal favorite of mine is the lighthouse, which is up here. In case you hadn't heard, the lighthouse was just named by New York State Preservation League to be one of the 7 to save, a designation that they put out every other year. And there's going to be an amazing effort locally to now get behind and really save our lighthouse, which is in tough shape right now. So that's just a sidebar.
Thank you. So I do wear many hats. I do run KingstonCitizens.org, but I spend my days working for Riverkeeper in the water quality program with Dan Shapley up in Kingston, and it's a real honor to be here with Paul today and my colleagues. But for the last 6 months, I've been embraced by Keep It Green. I live only 25 miles from Catskill. When I heard about the landfill potential, the Peckham landfill, I wanted to come and learn more, and that was in October. And I've been coming to meetings every month and getting to know the community further north from where I am in Kingston. And so today I'm here to support Keep It Green In your agenda, we have a very brief bio, an explanation of who these wonderful groups are. And Keep It Green is a fairly new citizen group who is mighty as can be, with wonderful members. Their bio here is Keep It Green is a volunteer community-based environmental organization. It's located in Greene County, and it supports sustainable development to reduce, reuse, and recycle. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce one of the organizers here today, Diana Abadi.
Thank you, Rebecca. So, third time's a charm. Let's see if I can get this right.
Diana, you've got to come closer to that mic.
How is this, Pat?
And you're getting there.
How is this? You can tell I'm not a jazz singer, right? Rebecca was talking about mighty groups and mighty members, and one of our mightiest members is David Walker. And David was born and raised in Troy with a view of the Catskill. He's a retiree in Catskill, and he is, of course, one of the original members of Keep It Green. He is a Higgins Professor Emeritus of Earth and Environmental Sciences at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. I'm not good at this. At Columbia University, and he's the former department and chair of the Earth and Environmental Sciences Department at Columbia University. Dr. Walker received his PhD at Harvard in 1972, and he was elected to the National Academy of Sciences in 1999. He taught field mapping geology in the Upper Valley, and he's done that since 1983. His research was recognized by the Geological Society of America, for which he received a Day Medal, the American Geophysical Union, he received the Hess Medal, the Geochemical Society, he received the Clark Medal, the Mineralogy Society of America, and he's a fellow there, and he's married with 3 children and has 3 grandchildren. Thank you very much. Please welcome Dr. Walker.
Thanks, Diana. I wish you'd call me Dave instead. A word about Keep It Green. We started as a resistance organization to keep environmental degradation under control in Greene County. So we started as a resistance, but we're also partially, yeah.
You're not well done.
Yeah.
We're also interested in promoting environmental, sustainably developmental activities that will bring economic activity to Greene County so that we're better able to resist the projects that are environmentally questionable that would lead to degradation of our environment. So we have a double mission. My mission today is to acquaint you with some of the larger issues that are in play throughout the Hudson Valley, of which the projects in Greene County at Catskill and Athens are just one moving part of a rather more complex scenario which is in play, and it's in play fairly recently for reasons I'll get to. The issue is what threatens our greenness here in Greene County. There's 3 important lines to the story with the blue stars. One is that there's a large amount of waste that's generated in the city and throughout the Hudson Valley that needs someplace to go. The second element of the story is that barging is a lot cheaper than trucking to move large quantities and tonnages of materials about. The third element of this story is there's a bunch of quarries along the river, which are big holes in the ground, many of which are played out, some of which are still active. And the idle and empty parts are simply awaiting some new purposing. So the question is, do these 3 stars add up to a narrative? An example of a narrative might be, ooh, let's put a lot of our garbage in these big holes in the ground and move it by barge. simple narrative. I'm sure you can understand it. It's very appealing at some level. The question is, do we in Greene County want to be part of the narrative or not? And it's my job today to acquaint you with some of the issues and some of the good parts and the bad parts of the potential stories that might play out in order to divert those waste streams into some place which is environmentally acceptable. I would hope very much that we could agree at the start as a ground rule that we're not open for just taking anybody's garbage. But there are other waste streams that might be, under some circumstances, attractive, and the particular one that's in play now is the construction and demolition, C&D, so to speak, that is flooding the market and needs some place to go. Do we want to be part of that? Well, we'll see. I hope to inform you today of what the issues and the choices are so that you can make an informed decision about what you guys want to do. I come from the bright lights and glitter of Catskill. You folks in Athens have to make your own choices. You don't want to make the mistake of our neighbor up the river, Rensselaer, New York, who were invaded and taken over by a landfill. They had the wisdom to co-locate it next to the high school so that the students of the high school could learn up close and personal what happens when local elected leaders make a real mistake and allow something like this to go forward. So I think it would be important that we keep as our ground rule that we're not going to become South Rensselaer or the dumpster of the Hudson Valley. I hope we can agree on that ahead of time.
Yeah.
Good. The narrative that I sort of outlined for you as, oh, here's a big hole in the ground, let's put our C&D waste in there, is playing out now in Rockland County to the south of us. There's a giant hole in the ground that used to be the Tilcon quarry from which aggregate was pulled for many, many years, but they're not doing that anymore, and it's sitting there idle filling up with water. There's a barge terminal, there it is there, so that part of the story is in play. And the appealing story of let's fill our hole up with something that's environmentally not too objectionable is playing out with Tilcon turning over the operation of filling the hole up to a small shell company, Hudson River Resources, that is interested in taking on the job and has put in a proposal to the town of Tompkins Cove to go forward with this. I'm not quite sure exactly where that stands at the moment, but we'll be watching that with some interest. And I know the Riverkeeper has in fact also weighed in, as this is perhaps not something that Rockland County wants to take on. There's an interesting theme here that Hudson River Resources, as I say, it's a shell company that does land reclamation and so forth. They label themselves as a resource company, not, you know, we're not a barge company, we're not a land reclamation company, we're a resource company, as if that were a green label that would help you swallow any of the questionable things they might be bringing to you. It's sort of, you know, calling themselves a resource company is like taking a hitman and relabeling him as a human resources consultant. It doesn't play well. So here's the one of the quarries that I'm telling you about that's in play now. There's one up south of Poughkeepsie at Crown Heights, which is not in play now that I'm aware of, but who knows. It has its barge terminal onto the river, but since it's still active, maybe they don't want to fill up the hole until they take all the stuff out of it yet. On the other hand, if you're a barge company and you got a load of C&D that you're taking north up to Crown Heights, you might want to think about what you're going to take coming back. And so if you take the C&D to Crown Heights, maybe you could take the aggregate back to the city. And if you have a two-way run, you make out like a bandit compared to taking your barge back empty. And so one of the material firms that is supplying the C&D to the Peckham project, which I'll tell you about later, that's Inwood. Inwood is in fact also a barge company, and it's also co-located with Nassau Ready Mix Concrete at the same site. And so for a company like that, it's a no-brainer. Hey, I take the C&D up to a working quarry, I get aggregate, I bring it back for my concrete operation. So although I'm not aware that this quarry is in play now, watch out. There's a big wet hole in the ground on the Rondout, just near Kingston at Connolly. That one could be in play, got a barge terminal right there, right out to the Hudson, straight shot. East Kingston has working quarries, which would potentially be in play down the road as a two-way operation. Aggregate south, C&D waste north. Beware. And then, of course, are the big quarries up north of us at the north end of the Helderberg Escarpment at South Bethlehem and Ravenna. They're co-located with the Lafarge cement operation, which is, well, you can see it where it is in this picture, and they're right near the Queeman's Marine Terminal, which has barge stuff. And it also has, here's a blow-up of this area here. The barge terminal has a conveyor belt that runs up to the cement plant, so that the two-way traffic of cement coming down the conveyor, you know, at night they'll run the C&D waste up where they can put it in parts of the quarry that aren't being used. So there's another potential player in this story. What about Greene County? That's what we care about, and that's what we're meeting here today to think about. By far the largest complex of quarries in the Hudson Valley are those that are in the cement belt south of Catskill. There's a huge complex that you may not even know about because it's invisible inside a hollowed hill to the west of the Helderberg Escarpment. That's, think, the cliff that's along 9W to the west of it. Here it is from the air in a Google image, and you can see that the scars in the inside of that hillside west of 9W are this enormous quarry complex. The Peckham organization has some asphalt plants and crusher operations there, and the south part, it's cement, and there's a different company, that's Lehigh Cement, and their quarries, I don't believe, are very active at the moment, but they sure are big ugly holes in the ground. I think they're just grinding clinker there rather than actually producing cement anymore. So there's a lot of real estate that is, how should we say, prime target for filling up in this rather simple-minded narrative that I spun for you. Barge, hole, waste, you know, put them all together and you get a particular picture. So we have a waste stream for sure. We have this huge complex of quarries. There are over 2 square miles of potential holes in the ground that could be filled in with anything really. Some of the local landmarks include Inbach Bay, Duck Cove, the Hudson River, of course. Cement's down here, so Catskill is up there to the north. This area, marked the Wholesome site, is the site of a former, first it was St. Lawrence and then it was Wholesome. That plant has been shut down and demolished and taken away. But they did have a barge terminal that ran off of this causeway out into the deep parts of the river for the delivery of cement to the market in the metropolitan region downriver. Here's the asphalt plant, and I'm going to show you next a view that's taken from the air across the lower parts of these quarries, across the Wholesome cement site, the former cement plant, across Inbach Bay and out into the river. Because it turns out that the interesting part of the story for us has to do with the Peckham takeover of the Wholesome site and the quarries that were associated with it. So in August of 2016, an application showed up at the DEC. And it was for a project that had to do with filling this gigantic hole. This is just one of the holes going up here. Here's the cement plant, sorry, here's the asphalt plant and its crusher, and you can see a big plume of dust rising off it, just so that you know where it's located. Over here is the site of the former Wholesome cement plant and this cloth building we'll see in subsequent views of this area. And this unnaturally green astroturf covered mound is in fact the old ash dump from the wholesome cement kiln operation that, spewed out coal ash for, 100 years or whatever length of time. Wholesome and Lafarge and their predecessors before them dump ash. And by the way, the whole area here up and down the cement belt has these ash dumps associated with them. Now, the story that I'm going to tell you is actually a little bit different from what goes on in Tompkins Cove, because the proposal, of which this picture was the cover page that went to the DEC, was a little bit different from the C&D dump it in the hole. What they wanted to do was put a lot of toxic ash. It was generated by a series of toxic ash incinerators throughout the Hudson Valley that Wheelabrator operated for Peekskill, for Poughkeepsie, for Hudson Falls, and so forth. So we have an empty quarry, check. We have a waste stream, we have that for sure, but it isn't C&D debris this time. It's toxic incinerator ash. And we do have a barge dock, but we only have that since Peckham took over the Wholesome site, including the causeway and the barge terminal at the end of it, on either side of Inbach Bay and Duck Cove. So the three red checks I said have the same elements that we looked at before, but they're different. But there was a closely held parallel project, which we didn't find out about until 4 months ago, which actually closed the loop and makes the story quite similar to the other ones which are in play. How'd the Wheelabrator proposal work out? Well, actually, it didn't play very well in the community. It had been on the table for 3 years, and it wasn't public knowledge until the spring of 2019. At which point Keep It Green sort of sat back, and I, as a geologist, found it such an offensive proposal from a geological point of view, not to mention its environmental disastrous fallout, that we formed and we made, shall we say, the public aware that there were problems with this proposal. It had serious consequences for the locale. Oh, I'm asked to get closer. When I did that, I sometimes hear some feedback.
Just talk louder.
Advice?
You're just not microgenic.
I'll shrink, and that way I'll get smaller. So, what happened was that the publicity that was generated made the Wheelabrator proposal extremely distasteful to the Australian bank, which was in the process.
Coming, they're working.
That was now taking over Wheelabrator. And so Wheelabrator withdrew their application in the spring of 2019, rather than face a full DEC review after the deficiencies of their proposal had been pointed out in some detail. I said there was a closely held project that is a parallel story to the Wheelabrator thing. This is the title page from an application for a permit, a Part 360, you heard about Part 360 from Paul, for a visual noise and dust screening berm along Route 9W in Catskill. Here's a working drawing of the berm, so to speak, and you can see that it was prepared in the working drawing, never mind the plan. The plan must have predated this working drawing for a long time. And this precedes by a whole year the submittal of the proposal to the DEC, or public or even, I believe, planning board awareness of this. Well, maybe the planning board knew, I don't know. But the public awareness of this proposal was a year behind them having these drawings that went into the proposal. There's the berm outlined in orange, and you say, what on earth is that doing there? What's the point of this berm? So here's the view from Germantown last fall, and you can see the cloth building. So I told you in the picture where the cloth, I showed it to you, and here it is on the map. And the view from Germantown shows you clearly where the clock building is, as well as showing to the right of it the AstroTurf green mound of coal ash in their dump. So the proposal was to essentially, oops, there we go. There's the berm in PowerPoint. It isn't built yet, but they would like to put a berm. Maybe they'll choose a more attractive color, I'm not sure, and put it there to hide an existing asphalt plant that's going to be expanded behind the berm, and the public will be protected from having to see the ugliness of this project by having this berm in place. One aspect of this proposal, which is emphasized quite forcefully, is that the C&D material is clean root carbs, and I'll tell you what root carbs are quite shortly. But the purpose of the berm is to hide some asphalt plant which they're going to expand into the space that's hidden behind the berm. So, yeah, it was planned for quite a while before it went to the DEC. So, what are the issues with the berm that they're proposing that raise environmental interest? Well, it's clearly a barely disguised unlined landfill, and it's got leachate problems. This was quite obvious to the DEC when they reviewed the project, and they said, you know, you have to go the landfill route rather than try and put this off as a construction project. The material that was to fill the berm and make the bulk of the construction was this stuff, Reucarbs, which is recognizable, uncontaminated concrete, asphalt, brick, rock, soil. And that's fine, they're passing it off as clean, but the issue is when you read the fine print in the proposal, is that this stuff is allowed to have 4% of other material besides just old bricks and asphalt. And so if you do the math, on a 600,000 ton berm, which is the mass that they're proposing to dump there, you have 4% of others, you could have 24,000 tons, not pounds, tons of toxin in the mix, and that would be perfectly acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable, maybe you don't either, but according to Peckham it is, and there wasn't any leachate testing specified to, in fact, get some handle on whether nasty things were coming out of this big pile of stuff or not. The idea that you have clean C&D is an oxymoron, as Paul just told you, and I'm just repeating what he told you previously. And if this is such great stuff at 4%, you might want to ask yourself why the Tompkins Cove project is weighing it at, oh, we can get stuff that's only 1% other material. Are we getting the crap end of the pile and Rockland County gets first choice? I think this is not a good way to be doing business. Let's look at the Reucarb material. There it is. It's right out of the Peckham proposal. And you can see it is, you know, it's granulated, crushed up concrete, asphalt, whatever. Let's hope that those rather unnatural blue stains on the concrete have nothing toxic and leachable in them. But, you know, passing quickly over that, I would ask you to consider whether visual inspection, which is the principal tool that Peckham is proposing to keep nasty stuff out of the stream, would be able to spot a barrel of DTT dumped into this big pile of sand, gravel, and crunched up asphalt. Toxic cocktailing is a very common problem with C&D materials. And I'm not just making this stuff up. When the DEC sent a SWAT team into Corollas' dump last summer down in Saugerties, the first thing they found when they tested was it was laced with DDT. I mean, where did they get this stuff? We haven't made it for decades, and yet it's showing up in these landfills as a clear and present danger to the health of anybody who lives down leachate path or down drainage from something like that. So it's not clear to me that a 4% standard of other and the possibility of somebody tipping a barrel of DDT off of the skyway over the Hudson as the barge is coming up from Brooklyn is something you want in your environmental future. The way you keep that stuff out is to test for it chemically at the point of delivery and the point of receipt. Supposedly, when it leaves Brooklyn or Nassau County, it will be tested. But Peckham is only proposing to test 1 barge in 10 chemically to see if there's stuff in it that you might not want. That's clearly unacceptable. And somebody other than Peckham ought to be in charge of doing the testing, and they ought to be randomizing and not a 1 in 10 formula. It's crazy. There are more issues with the berm, and who needs it anyway? And why do you want to hide an asphalt plant? Peckham has 2 asphalt plants here in Athens, and do either of them have berms on them? I don't think so. And so it's not clear that the standard for visual excellence is that you put a berm around your asphalt plant. The DEC told them that they liked the view as it was, thank you very much, and your proposal to put up a berm is superfluous, as well as, you know, it's a complete speculation of why that would be a good thing to do. And what asphalt plant is it that they wanted to hide anyway? You know, remember, you can't see the asphalt plant now because it's up in the quarry. And the quarry is a very good visual, sound, and dust shield. There's a big plume of dust coming up from the crusher when that's in operation. But otherwise, most people don't know what an enormous quarry there is up there behind the hill on the west side of 9W. If they wanted to expand their existing asphalt plant, they got 2 square miles of quarry that they can expand into, and nobody's going to be bent out of shape by them doing that. But I think that the reason is that they wanted to move the asphalt plant is because they were about to run 11,000 trucks a year, big 18-wheelers of ash up that access road through the asphalt plant and to the quarry where they were going to make that huge ash dump. And so I think it was something they thought, oh wait, we're going to mess up our quarry by having all these big trucks come in, driving right through our asphalt plant. We won't be able to get the asphalt trucks in and out through the traffic that the ash dump is going to be generated. So from that point of view, it made perfect sense to move the asphalt plant down to the river, build a berm around it, case closed. But the problem with bringing in C&D waste to the end of the barge terminal and driving it along the causeway is that you're going to generate dust, taking the stuff off of the barges, moving it along the trucks, dumping it on the berm. And you're right in the middle of Inbach Bay to the north and Duck Cove to the south, which the Department of State of the New York establishment rates as the best and the most important bass nursery on the Hudson. Freshwater tidal wetlands are in some jeopardy worldwide, and our biggest and best one is this complex, in Bach Bay and Duck Cove, where a lot of our bass fishery originates, at least the nursery part of it. I don't think you go in amongst the plants and the duckweed to catch them. I think you do that out somewhere else. So the fact that they hadn't even considered that as a possible problem, among other things, led the DEC to give them a notice of incomplete application, which if you if you decode that, that's a no thank you very much, go back to the drawing boards. They also the DEC also faulted the Peckham proposal because they didn't realize that this was an environmental justice area. So what happened? They sent them back to the drawing boards on December 4th, and maybe Peckham is redrafting their plans even now. We don't know. But why would they do that? It wasn't really about hiding the asphalt plant. They don't hide the asphalt plants up here in Athens. And now, when there's no ash dump anymore, there's no reason to move the plant, so the hidden rationale for doing so is gone. So I think we really have to look for another reason why they might have been interested in building this berm in the first place. Well, one reason might be that they're going to get tipping fees from Inwood and Alico for taking on this material that they can't get rid of otherwise unless they have some place to put it. I've done, you know, a crude calculation, and I think that, you know, they might clear $1 million or $2 million a year in doing this project. In other words, it wouldn't cost them to build the project, they'd actually get a little bit of money. That's not even enough to pay the bond on our new jail, but we're not getting the money anyway. The corporate office in White Plains is getting it. It's not even coming into this county. Another possible incentive for building this berm is that it's sort of, you know, nuzzled up to and surrounding the old, it's nuzzled up to the AstroTurf mound of coal ash, and it's also surrounding the site of the old cement plant. There might be some liability and legacy toxicity from that 100-year industrial operation. And one thing the DEC faulted them for in their proposal, there isn't any toxic review of the area that is in play for this particular project. You know, who knows what would happen if they cored the area and looked at the stuff that was under where the cement plant is, and what on earth is coming out of that coal ash dump that we don't know about. So that's a possible strategy, that the berm is in fact burying some old liability. But I think that what we have to worry about is this is simply a wedge strategy to introduce C&D into Greene County. It comes in, you know, informally in road trucks sometimes. Just think Corollas down in Saugerties, that goes on here too. But this is barge loads of the stuff, not the odd dump truck here and there.
Sir,
Yes.
have to speak louder. You hear me, I can't hear you.
I can, thank you very much. I'm sorry that I'm so challenged in working with electronic audio systems. Is that better? Yes. Okay, I'm not hearing the feedback either. So thank you, Rebecca, for tuning the business right. We're here to talk about Athens, aren't we? And I haven't gotten to Athens yet because I was sort of setting the stage for where Athens fits into this much larger picture of a Hudson Valley waste stream, a bunch of barges and big holes in the ground. Athens doesn't have a big hole in the ground to put this stuff in. So the other parts of the story, the barge terminal and a waste stream, it does have. And sure enough, right on cue, as soon as we're looking at the Wheelabrator withdrawing, out of the ether pops Athens Steve Doring Environmental Development, LLC, with the proposal to put a C&D processing facility, I emphasize processing facility, here in Athens. A couple of things to note. Note the environmental development wrapper on a shell company. Athens Steve Doring didn't even exist a year ago. It was formed simply to do this project. And LLC means you can't bite them in court, or at least not as hard if they weren't an LLC company. C&D, self-explanatory. Processing needs some explanation. I'll get to that shortly. Where is this proposed site? It's up on North Washington Street, right south of the boat launch on the Murdner Kill, which I've indicated with a white arrow there. So their proposal, this page is, a picture is taken out of their proposal that went to the DEC last fall, shows the site at 133 North Washington, where they're proposing to bring barges to the site, unload C&D material and process it, and put it in separate piles for asphalt here, concrete over there, and so on and so forth. This is an archival picture of this 16 years ago, when it was still a small tank farm and barge unloading point for hydrocarbons. I believe Peckham had something to do with this. Now the issue is processing. What is processing of C&D? One end member is you take it out of the barge, you put it in a truck and send it somewhere else. That's the simplest. On the other hand, processing might well involve crushing the stuff, screening it, and sorting it. And here's an example of what an operation for those processes looks like. There's a lot of dust. There's a lot of noise. And the character of your village would change substantially if you had a crusher at the end of North Washington Street. You wouldn't be able to hear yourself think in the Stewart house when you're enjoying a fine beverage on the premises where this crusher was going. The Tompkins Cove crusher makes a noise problem 2 miles away. So I have to tell you that this is not something that is going